Welcome to the Hmong Peeps Show, the one and only show that brings you ordinary people sharing extraordinary insights. Well, maybe. Here is your host, Chu Effin Lee.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Chu. Welcome to the Hmong Peeps Show. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Mei Lee Yang. I've known Mei for, we were like in high school.
High school,
maybe?
yeah.
So
you're gonna give away our age.
I already told them how old I was.
Yeah.
So,
probably 18 years.
Yeah. And I remember when I met with Mei back in our high school days, she was already into playwriting, doing plays, and just I think you were also doing a lot of writing, just poetry and everything like that. And then we went to college together too, actually. I think we had 1 or 2 classes together. And I have to say that I remember that class pretty well, and I don't mean this in any bad way, May, but I didn't see you in class a lot, and you got a better grade than I did.
What class was that? I'm not even sure.
All I know is after the class was over and I asked you, what was your grade? And you told me, and I was like, damn, man, I go to class every time. And
maybe it was French.
and she still got a better grade than I did. So then, since then, I think we kind of lost touch. We did our own thing, and you continued doing writing. So today I'm going to have her share her experiences with playwriting and just being a writer. And I think a lot of you out there who are aspiring writers, you may or may not learn a few things, but I'm sure May will have a lot of interesting things to share with you guys. So May, go ahead and say hi to people.
Hi, everybody.
Right.
And thanks, Chu, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. So do you remember the first time you wrote your first play?
Actually, it's funny that you should mention that because I think you and I wrote my first play together.
Oh, was that your first one?
Yeah, because okay. I was I always knew I wanted to write, but I was writing fiction and then some creative nonfiction. I started writing when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
And then when I was 18, I remember we were in this youth group and we were trying to write a play. So I had already been writing other stuff, but that was my first attempt to write a play. And I remember that summer I was writing the English version and then you were helping to translate it into Hmong.
Yeah. I remember bits and pieces of that. It was like the opening scenes of somebody sweeping the floor at one point in the kitchen, right? And I think
nothing happened with it.
But I remember during the U of M Hmong heritage thing, I think that a little bit of that was incorporated to it. I don't know if somebody stole the idea or if you were actually a part of that at one point. But I remember seeing it, and I thought, hey, that sounds just like what me and May did at one point a few years ago.
Yeah.
So whatever. But yeah, so since then, what have you been doing? I mean, I think a lot of people might recognize you from Confessions of a Lazy Hmong Woman.
Yeah, so some people don't even know my real name, which is Mei Lee Yang. But when I say I wrote Confessions of a Lazy Hmong Woman, they're like, oh, I heard about you somewhere. So I still do creative writing, but I make most of my living as a theater artist today. So I write plays. I've written, obviously, Confessions. We did a Hmong language version of it just because people said, I really like your play, but I can't bring my parents because they don't really understand English that well. So we did a completely Hmong language version of it. I've done semi one-person shows, including a show called The Child's House, which was about my relationship with ghosts. I have a show called 10 Reasons Why I'd Be a Bad Porn Star. And
I remember hearing that.
So which was, because, for a time in my life, I was teaching sex ed and I was also selling sex toys to make a living as an artist, and I realized I'm not making it a living. So
let me ask you something about that.
Yeah.
Sex toys.
Yes.
What was that like? Like, were you selling just to anybody, or was it focused on the community, or what?
No, so the thing is that, this is through companies like Passion Parties or Pure Romance, and so you usually it's women who want to invite their girlfriends over, and then you give them samples and have them look at stuff. So one of the things I realized was that people were so interested in learning more about sex toys and all of this stuff, but they didn't want to buy anything. So in a lot of ways, they hired me. They didn't hire me. I came in as free entertainment, right? So it was funny because I used to teach sexual health education. So I would go to like the juvenile detention centers and talk about birth control and sexually transmitted infections. And so the sex toys was kind of the same thing, except, you know, maybe they were drinking or something. Right?
I remember the last time I went into a sex store, and this is not because I wanted to go. It was part of a school project. I was in grad school, and part of it was to experience what it's like to go into a sex store and pay attention to your emotions and things like that. So I remember going in there, and I was just so embarrassed to go in there because I was like, do I think or I'm conscious of who saw me going to the store,
right?
You know, but then you think about, especially for Hmong, that's something that can be difficult to talk about openly. I think that's very true for the older generation. But then the interesting thing is, when you hear the older generations speak about sex, they're very good at it. They say a lot of things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, they make me blush.
Yeah, and then for our generation, I think we're more open to talk about it. But then I guess it depends on the right time and place to just talk about it.
Yeah. We're going through such a fascinating period right now in the Hmong American world because, you know, again, when, you know, I think you and I are the same age, and when I was a kid, we didn't talk about sex, or, you know, or older people talked about it, but they used these crazy metaphors, like you didn't really understand what they were talking about. But now, I mean, you know, I seriously think that Hmong people are going through a sexual revolution right now and a gender revolution because we never had an opportunity to talk about this stuff in the past, you know?
Yeah, so I hope it becomes more of a comfortable topic to talk about, because when you talk about the sex education piece, I think there's also a need in that. I'm starting to see a trend too. Maybe you can, you know, disagree or not, but I'm starting to see an increase in single parents or children born out of wedlock in our community. And to me personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you're okay with it and you can support that child, and you and your partner don't want to be married, but you had this child, and as long as you guys can, you know, I'm totally okay with it. But I'm starting to see an increase in that. Do you notice that too, or is it just me?
Oh yeah, there's an increase in a lot of things. Single parents, interracial marriages, divorces. So people now being single parents, but they were, you know, married before. And I think, you know, and again, I was talking to my friend who is Lao, and I asked her about, well, what do you guys do when people get pregnant and they're not, you know, they're not married? She's like, we don't care.
Oh, nice.
We just do whatever, right? Whereas, you know, back when I was a teenager, the solution was you get married. We don't care if you don't like each other. You got pregnant, you need to get married. And so I think what ends up happening in our community is that there are a lot of people who, you know, get married young, and they realize, we might not like each other so much when we're older. Whereas, again, for her, you know, I know she knows a lot of, you know, Lao people who are not married and have a lot of kids out of wedlock, but there's much more, they're much more okay with it, you know.
How would you feel when you say, you know, if you have a niece, nephew, or your own child, you know, have a child out of wedlock? Like, I often think about that, you know, when it comes to even like the Hmong traditions right now, like the Hmong weddings and all the traditional and cultural ceremonies and process. I think about, like, let's say if my daughter went out with her boyfriend and they went past 9 o'clock. Yeah. Like, I think the Hmong blood in me might surface up a little bit and say, well, I might find this dude, or I might make them marry, but I think the logical side of me might be like, you know what, I'm not gonna force him to get married. Right. You know, like, what do you think? What would you do in that situation?
I know I wouldn't force marriage on anybody because I think that it's just to you know, basically look good on the outside. Yeah. And you know, I really my first thing is, do you like this person enough? If you don't think you want to marry them, you probably shouldn't even be having sex with them, right? Right. But, you know, if you get into that situation, I mean, I've seen so many people who have had terrible marriages, and I'm not just talking about marriages where people are they it's boring or they don't like each other. I'm talking about abusive marriages, right, where they're once you're married in the Hmong system, you're kind of stuck, right? And it's hard to get out. And so I think that even if I knew somebody who was who became a parent, I wouldn't necessarily push them to get married just for the sake of looking good. And I think that but I think our responsibility as people, as friends, as family members, is to provide support so people, don't feel that pressure to get married. So, like, I remember years ago, a friend of mine, she had a child out of wedlock, and I remember her mom saying to some of us, like, you guys are her friends, you guys go to college. Like, basically her mom was saying, you guys, why are you hanging out with my daughter? You guys are too good for her, right? And I'm like, the judgment there was like crazy, right? I'm like, what's the problem with us still being friends with her? It's not anything bad, but I think it's about us as individuals choosing to say, it's okay, even if this man or this woman has a child out of wedlock, we're not gonna be judgmental. Just like the sex toy store. I mean, if you go, I mean, why are people gonna judge? Right? Why are you here to judge me? You came here for a reason, right?
There you go. Yeah, I think our generation, we have whether we like it or not, I think we have a huge responsibility to break certain cycles that didn't really work out for our parents or even for you and me, our generation. And when we break those cycles, I'm sure that there's going to be people out there who are not going to be happy with it. But I think, times are different. We got to adapt and adjust and try to figure out what makes sense, and not be too worried about, like you said, once you are married then you're stuck. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think I think we should all have choice,
right?
I don't know if you know this about me, but I did counseling therapy for a while.
I didn't know that.
So a lot of the couples that came to me, especially the Hmong ones, they think that they come to me to save the marriage. And in couples counseling or therapy, that's not the case. We come to figure things out to see if it makes sense to stay together, and if it doesn't make sense, then we need to talk about how you guys are going to split up. And so that kind of surprises them, and I think it's a good way to look at marriage as it's not something where you're stuck and you have to just be with that person, because we see a lot of stories that come out in the news where they've tried to have these resolutions with the elders, but the elders, they say, just hang in there, and then somebody ends up getting beat up or shot or killed, and that's unfortunate. And a play that probably the most recent play written is called The Divorcee Diaries, and it explores this issue of divorce in the Hmong community, because again, we always had divorce, but it wasn't that common. But in the last 10 years or so, there's been crazy amounts of divorce across all of the generations. It's not just young people, it's old people. And I have 4 characters in there, and it takes place in a nightclub, right? But they talk about their process of getting a divorce. One of them talks about how her husband abuses her, but every time she tries to leave, no one is there to help her. So finally she decides, I just have to leave because I'm gonna die, literally, right? And this is inspired by an actual story I heard. There's a woman who was just like, we grew apart. And again, that's a real story, right? Or I mean, one of the characters, the guy, is like, my wife wants to go to college. She thinks that I can't be part of her life for her to do this thing anymore, So anyway, so all of this is, I mean, I feel like we're living in such a fascinating time in Hmong American history. Yeah, definitely. So the plays that you have written, how much of it is just your natural creativity and imagination, and then how much of it is taking stories from people you encounter or you see?
So a lot of the stuff that I originally started creating, like the ones I had mentioned earlier, are things that are an extension of myself. So I really even though I write fiction, I mean, a lot of my stuff is creative nonfiction. It comes from our personal place, right? Confessions of a Lazy. I'm the lazy Hmong woman, right?
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, it's real. 10 reasons why I'd be a bad porn star. I mean, that's me, right? So I started writing things that were a part of my life or things I observed. And then over the years, people have said, hey, I have some ideas. Can you do something with it? And so things like the Divorcee Diaries, it's not about my personal life. I mean, I've been married for like 18 years. And I think that, but it's a topic, it's something that I see all around me, right? Last year, I started this program called Letters to Our Grandchildren, and where we went and we worked with another artist, and I worked with Hmong elders, and we created a show together. But again, that was, us going in as sort of like facilitators to help people shape their stories. So again, not my story, but I helped with the creation process. Okay. So I think all of my projects, it just totally depends. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned one of the plays you wrote something about you talking to ghosts or something.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this piece is called The Child's House. And it's actually, I only performed it one time, and I mean, one weekend, and it was too stressful for me to continue. It was actually a project I did at Intermedia Arts through their Naked Stages program, and I started writing about how when I was younger, right?
Okay.
But actually, it wasn't just when I was younger. It happened when I was an adult as well. And then I just started exploring, what does this mean? What does this mean? And the more I kept writing, the more I kept thinking about this house that my family and I used to live in Frogtown that was haunted. And that was sort of, when I was in 6th grade, we lived in that house. And that's the first time, among other things. And even as an adult, I still dream of that house. And so it's funny that I'm talking about this because most people who know me think of me as a comedian. So this is like my dark side, right? And so it was really creepy to me that as an adult, I still thought about that house. I still went back there many, many times. And I started exploring my relationship with my mom as well. So the piece is also about, because I don't know, I had a feeling that there was a dead child in there.
Okay.
Because the first time something sat on me, it felt like a child sitting on me. The last time something touched me in the house, before my family just decided to pack up and leave within a week, it was children's hands. So I kept feeling like, I don't know, there was a dead child in there doing something to me, right? So reaching out to me or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm only kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So
well, the reason why I ask you about that is because, of course, my channel, my YouTube channel, is really about spirituality, and that, of course, includes paranormal experiences.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned that play, I was just curious to know if that was something from personal experience, and it sounds like it was.
Oh yeah, it was all personal. It was probably too personal.
Yeah.
And my mom was also a shaman, and so what I thought was so fascinating was that she knew she and I had this weird connection to each other, where something bad would happen to me, I wouldn't say anything because I was already married. I'd lived away from home, but she would call me out of the blue and say, how are you doing? I'm like, this is weird. You don't call me to just ask. Something's going on. Or I remember one year I went over to her house, and all of a sudden she just took this bracelet and she put it on my wrist without saying anything to me. And I'm like, what is this for? She's like, it's a decoration. I'm like, I know you're lying because, and my nya was like, I think it's to ward off bad dreams.
Yeah.
So she, we had this weird connection. And then I remember the last time that I felt something touch me, which was like 10 years later, right? As an adult, I told her, and she was freaked out. And it was freaky for me because usually I'm alone, but I was with my husband in bed, right? So that was freaky that happened. And then they did all these ceremonies, and then basically they kind of gave me all these charms, and they block the spiritual world from me, right? And then after that, I stopped feeling connected to my mom.
Oh.
And I mean, seriously, I literally, I felt nothing. And I didn't get any more of those phone calls from her anymore. So.
Did those night terrors stop too?
They did, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so since then till now, have you had any paranormal experiences, whether it's in your current house or just anywhere else?
You know, I've felt funky moments, but nothing like what I used to be.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as a teenager, as a kid living with my parents, I think our houses were older, and there was always this freaky feeling going on. And then when I married my husband, I mean, they had a newer house, and like they have no, like, you know, nothing. They're not connected to that spiritual world at all. So, you know, I felt kind of cut off from all of that for like 10 years of my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I've had experiences similar to those night terrors too,
Yeah.
and it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's very draining, and you once you get out of that, once that thing gets off you, I don't know what it was like for you, but there was a lot of confusion and like what was that basically?
Yeah.
So a lot of you out there, you guys are still experiencing that, but I'm happy you shared that because, as I've said this many times before, some of these spiritual phenomena, it's universal. It's just not Hmong people. You know, anybody, Imana, you know.
Yeah.
And so when people try to tell me that it's all in your head or whatever, until you really experience it, you don't really know.
Right, that's a scientific, physiological thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But I always think about, well, why did I feel like textures of hands and, you know, or it turned out it wasn't just me. You know what I mean?
There you go.
There's like so many people in my family who went through so many crazy things, like in this house and in other households, or you know, my mom never said much when we lived there, but after we left, you know, I learned so much more. I mean, I remember as a kid, she would say things like, you know, don't comb your hair at night or else you're going to be poor. So I thought, okay, too late, I already did that.
Right.
But later, or don't whistle at night, or don't sing at night, right? Or you'll be poor. That's what she said. But later I learned you're not supposed to do that because you know, you might attract your dana, right? And so, you know, looking shy for you, so they don't actually tell you all these things. But, you know, I feel like my mom was kind of doing this kind of behind the scenes protecting kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of my dad and my mom, they do that to us too.
Yeah.
They do a lot of the behind the scenes thing and not let us know, because I think when they let us know, then our reaction is something that might offend them, so they don't want to have to confront that.
Yeah.
So as long as they have good intentions, I don't really care what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you too, May, when you do these plays, how tough is it to put the production all together?
I think it depends, because I've had plays where I'm just there as a playwright or a playwright / actor. And then, you know, there's a company that takes care of all the producing. In the last couple of years, I started a company, Lazy Hmong Women Productions, to produce my own stuff. So this doesn't mean that every single play I do comes through Lazy Hmong Women Productions. But the reason why I started it was because I'd go to, you know, companies, and they would basically kind of not know what to do with my stuff. They'd be like, I wanted to produce your play, but can you help with this? Can you help with marketing? Can you help with outreach? So I was like, basically, you're kind of asking me to co-produce, right? So I probably should maybe just produce it. Or when I did Confessions in Hmong, I needed somebody who knew the Hmong community. I didn't know who could do a good job with it, right? So then I decided to just figure it out. And so in those cases where if I'm playing like an artist and a producer, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But if I'm just an artist, not so bad. If I'm just a producer, not so bad. But I think, you know, one thing to keep in mind too is that most of the productions I've done are things I actually really, really enjoy. So you go into long rehearsals, but it should be fun. Otherwise, I could just go get a desk job, right? Sometimes when you're writing stuff, you get to moments where you're like, don't know what to do, I'm stuck, or it doesn't sound good. But eventually, you come back to finding the joy in the piece, you know?
So have you done, instead of plays, films, like short films or short TV skits?
You know, we did short trailers for, you know, to promote one of the shows. I've done, this past summer, I went to In Progress. They have a program for emerging filmmakers, because I actually would love to try my hand at film. So we, you know, shot a short film, like a 4 or 5 minute film, and I directed and, you know, wrote the screenplay. based on ideas that we had created as a group. And then I've also helped with some folks to create like PSAs around like social issues. So this past October, I worked with a group called Building Our Futures, and which is an initiative to end abusive international marriages. So I wrote, like a short PSA, and then we had another team of like artists who directed and videotaped and edited it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I asked you that because when I was in high school, I did that Hmong Cinderella play. I've always wanted to be doing theater too, but I didn't have the full support from my family the way I wanted to, and then I bought into the whole thing of just go to school and get a job thing, right? So, but a few years ago, I started to write these short skits. Like I actually had like scripts, you know, and something like a huge barrier that I had to encounter to realize that this is not easy was after I got done writing the whole thing, I had everything in my head. I bought video cameras, lighting, as you can see, computer software. Then my problem became, because I had in mind who I wanted to be in, in these skits. So then when I started contacting the people that I wanted to be in there, the issue was time, schedule.
Yeah.
So now the script is just like sitting there.
Yeah.
So for example, I did a script where, and maybe some of you guys might steal it from me at this point, which is okay.
Don't steal, please.
It's called. It's supposed to be a comedic skit where, I was going to be the owner of this company that offers this service of jipanya, right?
Oh, okay.
Right? So my job is for the men out there. If you have a hard time finding a partner, you would call my phone number on the commercial, and then you would tell us where we can snatch up that bride for you, and then I would get my guys in a van, and it's and I get that it's an inside joke. So when
this is Hmong humor, it's a borderline offensive and like funny and just like, oh my gosh, right?
I can imagine like some white people who don't know us watch it and then I don't see how this is funny at all,
right.
But anyway, so I had everything written up and I was ready to shoot, and then when I contacted my guys, because when I talked to them, they were all excited. Yeah, that sounds like it's a real funny skit. Let's get together. Well, we could never find a time together.
Yeah.
So then I just said, forget it. So now I have like those things just collecting dust. Maybe one day, when I find people who actually has time, they can pick that up and do it. So that's why I just want to ask you if you ever done the actual like video film skits and see what the work involved was, so that I can prepare.
Honestly, I want to do that. I think my barrier is that I think I can write, I can even act, or get other people, right? Find actors to do this work. I need the technical crew. So I'm crossing my fingers because recently a friend of mine was like, "Hey, I have a crew for you." Oh, yeah? Okay. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's a matter of finding people who are passionate. So it's not like, about whenever I'm available. If they're passionate, they'll say, let's make this happen.
I think that's the key word, passion, because I had a lot of passion into creating the script, but I think for those folks, they just had the passion in the spare of the moment.
Yeah.
They heard the idea that, that sounds so cool, but then when I say, well, we're going to have to get up at 7 in the morning, start shooting so we can avoid traffic and whatever. And then I think a lot of them were like, man, that's a little bit too early, and this is free. You're not paying me.
Well, and I think that's the thing about film and theater as well. Film more so than theater, but it's expensive, right, to shoot. And so you don't get paid as well, right? And so you really need that passion to come through. I think, I think a friend of mine was, what was I going to say? I think it's so important to just have a crew of people who want to work. I think it's important to have collaborative, something collaborative, because let's say maybe we devote all of our time to help you do your project, and the next time you devote your time to help my project, or vice versa. And I think people need to be willing to buy into that, because if they're not, then we're all going to just sit around with like, well, you have a camera but you have no script, or you have a script but you have no actors, or whatever. Like, that could be an interesting model for how to make some of these projects come alive.
Yeah, because I thought about when you mentioned the word crew. I have a very small circle of people that I trust and am around with, and those are the guys that I thought maybe me and my little crew we can do something like how, like Jackie Chan has his own little crew that they all show up in the same movies that he does every time. Same thing for Stephen Chow, and then we look at like right now the Hmong folks in Laos, like Satao, and them, they have their own crew every time they do a movie. So I was like, okay, I understand that piece, because they're so close to each other, they can be comfortable and really pull this off. And then I guess my guys didn't have the same passion, and so whatever, man.
Yeah, and that's why I think, as a writer, I told you that I've been writing since I was 13, and I've told people that I would be a writer regardless of whether I met Hmong people or whether I had a circle of friends, and because I already knew that was my path, right? But having been more Hmong and all of this stuff, it's changed the kind of work that I create. And I think that's why it's harder these days for me. Like when I meet somebody who, there's a friend of mine who's also a writer, and he's always like, God, this person has so much talent. They really should work harder. And I'm like, all right, I'm good, because if they don't want to work towards that, I can't do anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like a parent saying, you're really, really smart, you should go to college. But if you really don't want to go to college, you're not going to go to college.
Right.
And so I feel like I've helped to mentor a lot of people over the years. But if somebody doesn't have that passion to to do the work itself, then that's hard. And it's not to say that, because I've been in places where I'm stuck, I'm like, I have no inspiration, or I don't know what to do, or I need a community. But I always knew I needed to figure something out, right? And so I think the difference is somebody who's kind of like, I want to be a writer, or I want to be an actor, but I don't want to do any of the hard. I don't want to wake up at 7 a.m. I need to get paid. I think people who are who think they can just jump all of those hurdles. Yeah. I think that's challenging for me.
Yeah. Well, when you are doing this type of work, and since you've been doing it since 13, how did you break pressure maybe from your family? I would assume at this point that maybe playwriting was something that was your parents may not have been a big fan of. I
don't think they even knew the word for playwriting. Okay. I mean, some people already know this, but Hmong people, we didn't have a writing system until the 1950s, right? And in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of the people of my parents' generation never had a chance to go to school, or if they did, they had very elementary level education. And so for me to make a living doing writing as well as theater, things that are very westernized, it's kind of weird, right? But I've given this a lot of thought about why I make a living as an artist, and why someone else haven't had that opportunity or couldn't do that. And I really think it's because of my place in my family. I'm the fifth of 10 children. I am of my mom's kids, because they went through, my dad was married before, had 3 children, passed away, and then married my mom, right? So of my mom's kids, I'm like the second daughter. So basically, I'm in this place where nobody cared about me.
The middle child.
I'm like Jan Brady, right? I always say that I have the Jan Brady syndrome. So everybody had expectations for my older brothers, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Everybody had expectations for my sister, who was my mom's first, older sister, who was my mom's first child. Everybody had expectations for my brothers, who are also my mom's first, my mom's first son and youngest son. So everybody had a role to play, except for me. And so I think because no one had any expectations of me, I kind of just got to do whatever I wanted to do. And, I think about it. I think it would be really challenging for a firstborn son or daughter to do this kind of work, because there'd be so many pressures for them.
Yeah, right, because I'm that
person. Yeah, you're that person. I feel bad for
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because really, when I was younger, I really wanted to do performance theater, and just doing films or whatever. And my parents were giving me the spiel about, you're the oldest son, and we have many expectations for you to make us look good, and then I bought into all that BS, and then here I am not doing what I really wanted to do at one point. But you know, I really admire that you are doing something you love and you enjoy. You know, so even if you had all the, maybe you didn't have as much support as you should have, or you know, could have had, you still stuck to your guns, and here you are today still doing what you've been doing since you were 13. So
well,
I think that's
and
pretty cool.
there's, I mean, again, other factors, you know, like I think my husband, being married to him, and he's super supportive, because other people might have just been like, no, you need to do this or that. You know, my in-laws, when I first married him, my husband Peter, my father-in-law told me, you know, priority is for you to finish college, and you don't have to do dishes or do all that stuff. And I remember my mom and them were like, yeah, they say that, but really you should go do the dishes and cook and clean and go to college. And so I'm like, yeah, I'll just do school, you know. And they didn't push, right? They could have. And so all of, you know, there's those kind of support systems of just people like backing off or giving me room to breathe. I think all of that was super useful. And, you know, I think one of the things people don't realize is that when I was in my 20s, I had a full-time job. So I worked 9 to 5, and then I did my art at night or on the weekends. And then, you know, I finally quit my full-time job like 7 years ago, and I didn't want to look back. So I've always, you know, so it wasn't like I was bumming around for like 10 years or anything.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, now that you are where you are today, when you think back about when you started writing, and maybe it could have been like you were so young you didn't really get to get, you know, networking done, you know, like meeting other writers at that young age. But now that you are much older, do you see a lot of Hmong writers out there too, or have you not met as many as you think?
We actually have a lot of Hmong writers. Okay. I mean, you know, not as many as like other communities, but all things considered, right? When I was, again, 13, 14, 15, 16, I thought I was the only Hmong writer around. And I remember when I was 17, 18 years old, my senior year in high school, you know, I opened up the newspaper and I saw that there, you know, Bandar Voice, right? Which is a Hmong literary arts journal. And I was like, I need to go see their reading. And I went, and I was so amazed that there was a group of Hmong writers there. And I found a community. I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah, well, you know, so I grew up, you know, I was really fortunate when I was 18 to find a lot of these people, and I did theater. I was, you know, again, I saw an ad, Hmong Theater is looking for actors. I'm like, okay, I don't want to work at Taco Bell anymore. Let me try to see if I can do this acting thing. And so I toured with them, you know, every spring. They did a show, Hmong Tapestry, and I would perform. And so I was really fortunate because I was 18 and everybody was around 23, 24, 25. And it's really fascinating because now, 18 years later, there are all these people that used to be artists, and now they're kind of a big deal. Like, I was talking to my friend about Senator Fong Ho is a filmmaker. I met him when I was 18. He was doing Ge Kong Xia, right?
I remember that.
You know, Van Ming Ta, who's the executive director of the Asian Economic Development Association, again, a filmmaker and activist, right? Representative Sai Tao, I met him when I was 18 because we were acting in Hmong Tapestry together. So all of these folks, I'm like, I thought they were just artists. I'm like, oh, you guys became politicians.
So is there a future for you in politics then?
No, I don't think I'd be a good politician. Swear too much, probably.
So the folks that are out there who may be watching this video that are into writing, such as what you've done, I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen as far as like changes? Like, would you think that the content in our communities changed, the context has changed as well, or do you think it's still the same as when you were younger, as far as like writing?
Yeah, I think it depends on all of that stuff actually. It's changed because in some ways, because when I was younger, a lot of people were still trying to process. We just came to the United States. We're the first generation, or the 1.5 generation people. We're living between two worlds, or we're still talking about the war. Those are big themes. Sure. Now people are like, I want to write Harry Potter books. I want to write romance novels. I want to write stuff that has nothing to do with Hmong people. So that's an evolution, right? There are people who had better skills, right? Because they actually go to school. They take classes in high school and college or whatever. And so they have more opportunities to like take classes. Whereas when I was younger, I mean, I didn't take my first creative writing class until I was a junior in college. And that's because when I was in high school, I was taking, you know, IB and AP classes, so I couldn't put creative writing in there, right? I mean, it's stupid, but that's real, you know? But now there are so many more opportunities, more arts organizations that were, you know, or, you know, they're teenagers today whose moms are my age, which is crazy.
I know.
You're like, oh, that's my kids, right? And so, you know, their moms could say, I'm going to take you to the law to take a writing class, or I'm going to take you to chat to take a writing class. Whereas, you know, when I think of Hmong parents, I still think they're like old people like my parents' age, and I meet the parents and they're younger than me. I'm like, oh, okay. So, I mean, I think that the world has changed. And, but I think what was interesting about the group of writers I grew up with was that everybody was socially conscious in some way, shape, or form. Like, even if you didn't write about social issues, you knew it was important to have a voice as a Hmong person to tell your story, because if you didn't, somebody else could be, you know, somebody, like, for example, you know, if I'm listening to your story, you know, I might just say, well, Chu's never going to write this. I'm just going to go write it, you know, whatever. So, because back in the days, a lot of, like, yeah, a lot of Nika people wrote Hmong stories, right? They took ideas from us and wrote it. Nowadays, Hmong people are like, no, it's not going to happen, you know? So I think, yeah, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but.
Okay, no problem. Because I asked that because, you know, we think about like our generation growing up. We might be, for example, we might write about how at one point pagers were so cool, right? And then our kids would have no idea what the hell we were talking about. What is a pager, you know? And so, just thinking about that, and even as I've mentioned a couple of times on this show and in the other episodes, I keep referring to the Hmong community. And that's probably because I'm in that generation where I can't escape my parents' generation. I'm in the middle because now I'm seeing my kids grow up in a different generation than I am, and so I'm stuck in the middle. I can still say community, Hmong community, because we're so small. I wonder, like, when my kids get to my age, would they even give two shits about what Hmong community is, you know?
Well, you know, and I remember as a teenager, you know, we talked so much about how we need to bridge the gap between the older generation and the younger generation, younger and older generations, and you know, but people were still talking about it, and then I realized we couldn't figure out an answer because we didn't know an answer. But now you're like, we're stuck. But actually, I feel like people our age, we are that bridge between the two worlds. I mean, literally. I mean, I was born in Banbinai, right? Came here. I mean, I still remember. I remember the old Hmong American world, and it's crazy to see how much has changed today. And I think in terms of kids, I mean, it's a matter of just, we need to be intentional about what are the things we want them to keep, what are the values we want them to have. Because, again, as a teenager growing up, I remember, you know, you grew up with, you know, a poor family, parents who didn't have an education, you know, just racism, blatant racism. And I remember so many of us were going through internalized oppression, right? We were taught to try to be white, you know, or try to be black, or try to be something, anything but Hmong, because Hmong was bad, right? And now kids are like, you go to Como High School and it's majority Hmong kids. So they have the luxury of being comfortable, but then they're so chill, they don't do much thinking about themselves and their families and the things that other people had to go through for them to, you know, find comfort. Right.
So, I mean, the comfort piece, I totally get what you're saying. When I think about, you mentioned racism, you know, you and I are pretty much the same age, and I remember growing up, going to high school or junior high and experiencing blatant racism.
Yeah.
And my kids, I think, you know, Andrew's 9, Adam's 6, so when they're going to school, I think it's going to depend on which school they go to. For example, if they go to Como right now, I would imagine that they may not experience racism as much as when we were going. Or I think you went to Central.
I went to Highland.
Highland, oh, sorry. Yeah, so like when I went to Como, and you know, back there was a lot of Hmong kids then, but there was not really unity there. But now I think that because the younger generation, they are more socially conscious of the impact of racism, how it can impact other folks, and so I think they're less racist at this point. So I think my kids will have it a lot better too, and they'll be more comfortable going to school and not have to worry about being called a chink that day.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but there's a different kind of racism going on, you know, just hipster racism. You know, so there are kids who are like, oh, I can throw on the N-word because I listen to hip-hop. I'm like, that's not cool. Don't go there. or you know, or, you know, yeah, or, you know, white kids saying, you know, I've got Hmong friends. I can make say stereotypes about Hmong people, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of, it looks different, right? But it's not as blatant as it used to be. And I sometimes wonder if, like, I don't know, it's crazy these days, like just going on Facebook every single day. If there's a race war happening, I feel like it's going to happen now. Because there's so much crazy racial tension happening. So I wonder how much progress we've made. You know?
Are you, where do you stand as far as, because you mentioned being a comedic writer too.
Yeah.
So are you cautious of how you write your plays, as far as maybe there's going to be dirty jokes in there, or maybe a joke that might be offensive to a certain group of people? Are you conscious of that when you're writing? Or?
I am conscious, and so if it makes it in my play, it's because I made a decision to keep it in my play. So, oh my gosh, I was trying to think of. It's hard because, you know, the bad thing about being a person of color is that, you know, coming from a marginalized community, is that you write something and people are going to be like, oh, you're representing our whole community. When I'm just writing about myself from my perspective. Even Confessions of a Lazy Hmong Woman, a lot of people liked it, but I remember hearing my cousin was saying some women were so offended by it because they didn't know anything about the play. But they were so offended because they thought I was making Hmong women look bad by saying that Betunggang na. And so my cousin's like, you know, she's the lazy Hmong woman. She's talking about herself. And then they were like, oh. You know, but I mean, so those are the things I have to go through. Or, you know, when I was writing my divorcee play, you know, I remember my husband was like, you're making these men look really bad. I'm like, but I'm just keeping it real. He's like, I know you're keeping it real, but they still look really bad. And so, you know, those are things I listen to, and I think that some people might look at some of my male characters and think, I actually know this happened for a fact. This man actually said to my cousin that he felt like my male characters were all stereotypes and I was making Hmong men look bad. And I'm like, actually, from my conversations with my husband, I did try to humanize them somewhere, right? But in fact, these are real people. These are real people I met in real life. I'm not making them up. A Hmong man really did say to me, you're so cool, you're like an air conditioner. I did not make that up. You know what I mean? So, but I get it, and it's my responsibility. I have to take responsibility for how things roll, like, you know. But I think that I definitely don't want to be the kind of person who is always in the middle, who's like so afraid to say something. I don't even think I'm trying to, you know, I'm not even trying to like be a badass and challenge stuff. I'm just trying to tell the stories I'm interested in hearing, or I think other people might be interested in hearing. Yeah, without feeling censored.
Yeah, because I enjoy watching comedy, stand-up comedy, just funny movies, and I often think about the censorship piece.
Yeah.
Because I believe if you censor yourself, then you're not fully expressing your art. Put it that way, right? So, and I get it how some people could find it. I mean, where do you draw the line when you say, "Wait a minute, that's not funny anymore"? You know, to me, I think it's tough to draw that line because, you know, it's only funny if it doesn't happen to you or it hasn't happened to you. But comedy and laughing is always at somebody's pain, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's really, I guess some people are just way too anal about things.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to laugh at things. If it's, for me, if it's funny, I'll laugh. Even if it's a racist joke or a dirty, nasty joke, if it's funny, I'll laugh at it. But I don't have any bad intentions on saying pointing fingers at that point. It was about you.
Right. And I think we laugh at it because it's speaking to some kind of truth, right? I don't care for slapstick humor. I'm not the kind of person who does like fart jokes, though I do laugh at some of them too. But I think that, I mean, you were joking earlier about, wouldn't it be funny? We had this company where men were kidnapping women, and I was laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, But it's a commentary about our community and stuff that's happening, right? I love satire, right? And satire has this kind of funny relationship between, like, again, uncomfortable and also hilarious, but whatever. But I think that what I do is I'm willing to poke fun at myself. I'm not just being. I think it's very mean when you're like, oh, I saw something that somebody did that. It'd be funny if we made fun of them, or it would be funny if we made fun of that. But I'm willing to also, poke fun at myself and be vulnerable. And I hope that comes through, so it doesn't seem like I'm just dissing people.
Yeah, because we see this in the mainstream news where people get like they lose their job over a comment that they made of a certain group or something like that, and to me, it doesn't make sense that people can actually lose their job saying those things. And then I'm also aware that they have a platform where it gives them a lot of power. I'm aware of that too, and I guess it depends. I guess it depends on a lot of things.
It depends, because I could, I think I could say some things and I get away with it because I'm an artist, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like, let's say if I go to a conference and I swore, whatever, she's an artist. But if there was somebody like the executive director of some organization came in, wearing a suit, and they swore, people might be like, "Ooh, that did not, it's not appropriate." I mean, we can talk about, going to the, sex store, right? It's cool. But if, again, a politician talked about it, it might be like, "Ooh, no, not a good idea." So I think it depends on your place and your personality, and but I do stop myself a little bit because I'm on Facebook a lot, and there are things I might say, and I realize, I'm friends with some 16-year-olds, or I'm friends with their parents. Maybe I shouldn't go there.
Wow.
So I think that's probably where I censor myself the most. Is just, is it a kid appropriate? Am I in a place that would be, are there kids in the room where I need to just be a little bit more appropriate?
Yeah. So I struggle with that when I'm in front of a large group talking about certain subjects, and then this line comes to my head where I think this is going to get a good laugh, but then I have to be conscious of, okay, who's sitting out in the audience here, because it might offend them. But I think at the same time, if it's like I said earlier, if it's funny, laugh at it. And I'm like you too, where I make myself vulnerable. I don't have a problem making fun of myself. So when you're writing as a writer, I just wonder, as far as censorship goes, how often do you have to think about that before you actually put it out there?
I don't censor myself, really. I mean, my advice to people is just write. Give yourself permission to write, and I guess then when you're editing, you can start thinking about censorship, right? If you want to go there. I think again, censorship is, I had a poem, for example, called Lao Papaya Salad is like anal sex. There are no swear words in that poem. Okay.
Say that again.
Lao Papaya Salad is like anal sex, right? There are no swear words. But I was gonna read it at this one event because it was late night, and then there were kids, and so I'm like, I guess I can't read it. There are no swear words, but I guess I can't read it. So again, I didn't censor myself when I wrote it. I just wrote whatever. But once I got to the space and I looked around, I realized, ooh, they're little kids. Okay, let's not go there. But I think, I don't know. I actually don't try to be funny because that's hard, for me. If I just sat there and thought about jokes, most of the time people think I'm funny because I just, again, keep it real. I just write down or talk about real life observations.
Yeah. So speaking of comedy, have you done any type of stand up?
I haven't, but I thought about it. I want to take some classes because it would be a lot cheaper than doing a show, right? A theater show. you do a theater show and you have to deal with lighting and all
Right.
that stuff. A stand-up, you show up in front of a mic and it's storytelling and it's setting things up, which I like watching comedians, but I haven't gotten any training, but I would like to try.
I think you should. I've read some of your Facebook posts, and I find some of them very funny. So I would encourage you to. I thought about doing it too, but I feel like I'm past my prime to be on stage for some reason.
Well, and that's the great thing about, honestly, like I watch a lot of, K-dramas and other stuff, so a little bit part of the South Korean world. What I find fascinating is that the actors and actresses are usually the ones who have plastic surgery and they have flawless skin and they're really thin and all this stuff, and the comedians look like normal people. So
That's
I'm like,
very true, though. That's
okay, I
very
guess that'll
true.
give me permission to like just be myself. But yeah, I don't think anybody's ever passed their prime. I mean, there are people who become artists like when they're 56 years old. There's a woman I know, I think she's always done storytelling, but she retired, right? She was the teacher, she retired. And now she and her husband, they're exploring their artistic selves. And then they also go on vacations to France for like months. I'm like, I want to be like you guys when I get old. They just have regular jobs, right? And they worked towards that. But, she didn't get a chance to just live the artist life until after she, retired. But
Maybe I might be a late bloomer or something. I don't know.
well, and my project with my Hmong elders, I mean, they probably didn't think of themselves as actors, right? In fact, I couldn't even figure out the right way how to describe actors, so we just said, sitting only say that, right? That's the best way I could describe it. We're making something like a movie, except it's live. And you're gonna be like the hero and the heroine, and they weren't sure, and then they finally did it, and they were like, "Oh, this is good."
Sure.
And it's like, some of these folks are like 60, 70, 80, and so
That's cool.
you never know. And I want to hire them to do stuff because
That'd be cool.
there are people who want to work with elders. I mean, does she wanted to really train, or does she know how to reach the elders now? So,
Right. All right. Well, what are you currently working on right now?
my project right now is actually I'm working with my BFF. Her name is Samukta Vangsai. We call her Mux. She and I are writing a play called Hmong Lao Friendship Play, or if you're Lao, then it's Lao Hmong Friendship Play. So it's an exploration of just our relationship as friends, but also about our communities, because we're all here for the same reason. We all came from Laos. We all lived in refugee camps, but there's so much we don't know about each other,
Right.
and there's so many similarities and connections we have, but also so many divergent things. And so, yeah, we're in the process of finishing writing that play, and we're gonna stage it this September.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming down to the hour here. So if people want to get to know you, I mean, I know that you've shared a lot of interesting experiences and your work, and I think a lot of folks who are into writing can benefit so much if they get a chance to meet with you and connect with you. So what's the best way to get a hold of May?
Yeah. Well, you can. I'm on Facebook. I'm friends with a lot of people, right? So, you can always just find me. I'm just Mei Li Yang, and I'm purposely on public, right? But if you really, really want to email me, you can email me at may@lazymongwoman.com. So that's just one long word, lazymongwoman.com.
Yeah, I'll put that information on the video description here too. So can I ask you one final question and I think I'm going to start asking this to a lot of guests, and you are the first one.
Okay.
When you think about Hmong people, give me the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I think the good is that we feel so connected to each other as people. Anywhere you go, whether you hate Hmong people or you love Hmong people, you recognize Hmong people, you connect, right? We have this history we have this need to help each other out, even if you're the kind of person who's like, I'm better than you, I'm going to leave you, you're still thinking about us, right? So I think that's the good thing about Hmong people. I think maybe what is the bad about Hmong people? I don't know. I mean, so many things I could possibly say. But I guess maybe one thing is I wish that we wouldn't care so much about what other people thought. Because if we cared less about what other people thought, we would be happier with ourselves and with our families and with each other. And what was the last one?
Ugly.
the ugly,
Mm-hmm.
the ugly. I think the ugly side of our community is how we abuse each other. And I think about, we talked about abusive international marriages earlier,
Mm-hmm.
just briefly, but, I don't want mean to be judgmental, but I guess I am going to be judgmental. I mean, I think it's actually okay for people in the U.S. to go back to Mlote and Taite to marry, right? If they're legal, right? But I think it's crazy when people go back there and exploit people who are underage or 20, 30, 40, 50 years younger than them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a two-way street, but it's we always talk about Hmong na, and so it's kind of sad to think about how now that we're in a better place financially and otherwise, it's sad to see us treat Hmong as less than human,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and actually even some of the Hmong people here too, because this affects children and wives and some husbands too,
Yeah.
So
That topic is very interesting to me, and I've been meaning to do a show on that, but
Yeah.
I've just been more careful about how to structure it. So
yeah,
if I'm going to piss people off, then I want to do it to the fullest extent. And if I'm
Right.
not, then how do I do it and I don't want to be like politically correct
Yeah.
in this issue, because I think I'm entitled to speak honestly about it, because it hits close to home.
Mhm.
So I'm still structuring that, thinking about how to do that. But
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
right. And I mean, again, I think it's fine to marry overseas if
Mhm.
it's legal and consensual.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when it's not, right? It's about exploitation.
And to talk about something that's related to that is even in Laos or in Southeast Asia, where the custom is like you know. I said this in the previous show where I said, if that's part of the custom over there and that's how they do things,
Mm-hmm.
then who am I to say that you shouldn't do it, if that's always been the tradition? But then the other piece of me is saying that girl is a human being,
Yeah.
so then there's conflict. Like, to
Mhm.
me, I'm conflicted, because part of me can see how it's part of the culture, part of the
Yeah.
custom, but then the other side of me saying, you can't just imagine somebody taking you, whether you're a man or a
Mhm.
woman, somebody just pulls you off your mom or away from your dad and just say, you're gonna be in our family today. So
Yeah, and I think some customs need to change. I mean, because we criticize young people and say, young people are too Americanized. Why are you going clubbing? Why are you doing all this stuff? But then we can also say, well, they're drinking, they're like clubbing. Again, okay, as long as it's safe, right? But there's all this judgment, and basically there's an assumption that it's young people that are changing the Hmong world, and it's not true. All of us, young, old, we're all changing the Hmong world, and some things I think need to go,
Mhm.
and some things we need to say we want to remember this and we want to keep this for the future.
yeah, and I think that again, the responsibility of that lies heavily on our generation
Yeah.
to change the cycles. All right, May, thanks for being on the show. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming. And when you have this play finished,
Yeah.
I would like you to come back, and maybe
Awesome.
your co-writer, can I call her that?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
Maybe she can come. She or he.
She.
She can come back on here with you, and let's talk about that.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'll see you next episode. Bye.